After his death in the real world, he moved to a magical parallel world and combined his fighting ability with the power of magical healing.
Another sanctuary circle! Go!
Events began in the real world, and we saw an employee coming out of work happy and dreaming of a promotion after successfully performing all his job duties and dreaming of a happy life ahead. Suddenly, without warning, everything changed, and an exciting chase began between the police and a criminal. And before the policeman could catch the criminal fired a bullet from his gun that lodged in the heart of that employee we saw earlier. The employee fell to the ground, stunned, unable to believe what had happened. He was just a few seconds ago dreaming of a promotion. After a short time, the soul of the murdered employee was transferred to another world, and he was at a younger age, but he was surprised by everything that happened, but he couldn't help but adapt to the new situation and try to understand it. Then the employee noticed that there were several data in his eyes, like an application on the phone, and he had to complete these data such as name, age, and occupation, and then he chose the name Lucio. As for his profession, he chose to be a magical healer who faces monsters and eliminates evil. In his new world, Lucio realized that he was 15 years old, a young age, but he was considered a young man in that world. He then saw the corpse of a monster, but he felt very scared and started running, emphasizing to himself that he didn't want to die in this world either. Lucio then arrived at the Guild of Magical Healers, but he was worried that he would be discovered by the security personnel, especially since it was his first time going to the place, but he managed to circumvent them and get in. Lucio was surprised to see that most of the people entering the guild were paying coins, and he didn't have any, but soon a female official came and escorted him inside the guild without paying any coins. Lucio bumped into Akali and apologized profusely, but a healer named Lumina intervened and asked Lucio to follow her. Soon they entered an imposing room, and Lumina informed him that they were standing in the main room of the local magical healers, but Lucio was so amazed by everything that for a moment he felt like he was dreaming. Lumina gave Lucio a data form and asked him to fill it out, but this time it was difficult because Lucio couldn't remember where he was from. Another healer entered the room, and Lucio noticed that she spoke to Lumina with great respect, and Lucio realized that Lumina was a high-ranking member of the Healers Guild. Lucio tells Lumina that he can't remember the name of his hometown or village, but Lumina tells him to write down any name he remembers, as it doesn't matter in his world anymore. Lucio then asked Lumina the name of the place where he was located after moving to his new world, and Lumina told him that they were in the town of Miratoni in the Republic of Street Shorel. After some time, Lucio received his credentials to the Magical Healers Guild, and Lumina's assistant took them away. When Lucio asked why, Lumina told him that the assistant would enter his credentials and then tell him which department he should start studying in. The assistant came out and told Lucio that he had been accepted into the guild and that the best department for him was holy magic. The words were strange to Lucio, but he was fascinated by them, but what worried him was that he knew almost nothing about holy magic, and when he brought it up to Lumina, she was amazed. Lucio knew that he must pretend to be familiar with all branches of holy magic, and so he did so, telling Lumina that he would strive to learn everything about it. Lucio then had to choose which subdivision he would study during his time in the guild. After being presented with the divisions, he chose Spartan magic, and to the amazement of those present, we concluded that it was the most difficult division of all. Lucio began his lessons with great enthusiasm and immersed himself in the books of Spartan magic, but what frustrated him was that his magic was so weak to begin with, that he had to make at least 50 full attempts to get one to work. But as time went on, things began to improve. On the second day after Lucio's scores had risen, he was very happy and began to recognize his classmates, and we saw him admiring the beauty of Monica, who came into his room to serve him breakfast. By the third day, Lucio had mastered the first of the healing spells on the first try, and he tried them out, and they were all successful. Lucio went to the management to report that he had mastered the spell and gave them a silver coin for the use of the spell, but the assistant, upon learning that Lucio had come to the guild with Lumina, immediately returned the coin, and Lucio remembered the situation at the gate when he entered with Lumina without paying anything. Lucio wandered through the guild halls and came across one of the most skilled magical healers in the guild, a man named Beizan. Lucio chatted with him, and then they were all surprised by a group of injured individuals, but one of them was worse than her peers, and Lucio decided to use his abilities to cure her. Lucio began to treat her, but he felt something very strange as he found that his magic spell was not working, which made him puzzled, especially since he was confident that the spell would work. Lucio kept trying over and over again to no avail amidst the amazement of all those around him, some of whom were amazed at his attempts despite being one of the newest students in the guild, and others were amazed that his spells were not working. Suddenly, Lucio felt very tired and knew from the data displayed in his eyes that his magic had ended, and then he fell to the ground and lost consciousness completely. Lucio kept having dreams in his sleep and knew he had to strengthen his magic by joining the Adventurers Guild because studying at the Wizards Guild alone wouldn't be enough. Lucio resolved to go to the Adventurers Guild and actually went there and started the enrollment process. Lucio learned from the guild master that all members learn the basics of adventuring, blending it with magical power, and with each successful mission they perform, their magical healing abilities increase, which is naturally what Lucio needed. Nanela, an official of the Adventurers Guild, told Lucille that each adventurer is also paid for the tasks they perform, but Lucille told her that he is not so much interested in earning money as he is in improving his various magical abilities. But Nanela told him that this was not her decision alone, and that's when Lucille asked her to inform the people in charge of training healers to make a decision about him. Nanela asked him to wait, went away for a while, then returned with a man who looked strong and stern. The man named Broad spoke to Lucille and asked him why he wanted to learn how to fight and have adventures. He told him that he wanted to get stronger so that he could defeat any monster in any adventure, and at the same time he could use his magic to heal the injured. Broad agreed to Lucille's request and set a date for training, and Lucille kept visualizing himself after he had mastered fighting. The days passed and it was time to start combat training. When Lucille arrived at the training hall, he was amazed at its size and shape. Soon after, Broad appeared with a stern look on his face that frightened Lucille. Broad told Lucille that they were going to start intensive training to get Lucille up to speed. Lucille was excited, but when he started training, he felt exhausted, but Broad kept encouraging him. Lucille started jogging and then stretching to gain more fitness, but after a little while he felt tired again, but Broad didn't give him that chance and told him to get up to continue. Lucille began to learn martial arts, but Broad was surprised by his low level and his weak kicking legs. Broad asked Lucille to start a new attempt at fighting and asked him to attack him. Lucille tried to focus all his efforts on throwing punches and kicks at Broad, but his attempts failed one after the other. But Broad reminded him that a true fighter doesn't give up no matter what. He then began to counsel him, telling him that in any fight, he must take care of his life first and then make sure he doesn't get injured. Broad then asked Lucille to promise to use his abilities to treat the injured, regardless of their nationality, and Lucille promised to do so. At the end of the training session, Lucille felt like he couldn't move. He had an idea that he liked. The idea was to use the magical treatment on himself in the recovery period after training to keep track of his learning progress, but the teacher told him not to do that and to let his own body's ability take over. A few injured people soon arrived at the Adventurers Guild and asked if there was any healer who could heal them, and Lucille was thrilled and offered to help them. The first patient had been bitten by a wolf in the forest, and on the first try, Lucille successfully treated her injury and then successfully treated the rest of the patients. Master Broad then asked Lucille to try to waste all of his magical energy before practice every day so that they could fully charge his magical energy in practice, and Lucille promised to do so. We noticed that Broad admired Lucille's courage and love of learning against all odds, so he told him that he would be eager to teach him everything. Lucille was delighted to hear this and kept remembering his old life and how he used to put a lot of effort into trying to learn something new, and when he compared his old life with his current one, he found that his current one was much better. He vowed to his teacher that he would do his best to save as many injured people as he could through what he had learned and what he would learn, and then the teacher praised him and told him that there were few people like him in that job, which of course made Lucille happy. An agreement is made between Lucille and his mentor, Broad, that their training period will be 1 month, which surprises Lucille, who already knew that no apprentice is allowed to have a training period longer than a month. Broad told Lucille that he had great power in the Adventurers Guild and that he would do so because he saw in him a good fighter with a good heart. Then began a new phase of hard training for Lucille, the first of which was a cold water shower before training, which was very difficult at first, followed by a number of difficult exercises. After class, Lucille's clothes were very sweaty and Lucille was about to do laundry when Nanela came in and told him that she would wash his clothes for him at Broad's request, and she was happy to do so. At first, Lucille is embarrassed, but he agrees and gives her the clothes, and we see signs of admiration in the way Lucille looks at Nanela. Broad then asked Lucille to go to the food court to eat his meal, and there Lucille found the most delicious food. Broad told him to pay attention to the food. Lucille didn't need a recommendation. He devoured everything in front of them. After eating, Broad told him that he needed to get a good night's sleep so he could continue training hard. Lucille went to his room to sleep, but he didn't feel sleepy, so he stayed awake. Because his passion for training was overwhelming, he spent most of the night practicing fighting, stretching, meditation, magical energy, and more. He fell asleep late. Not long after, he heard Broad knocking on the door. Although he hadn't slept well, he woke up immediately and went to the food court to have breakfast. There, Lucille met Golgar, the cook in charge of preparing food for the fighters, and we noticed that Golgar offered Lucille a drink of a strange shape and color, and although Lucille did not want to drink it, but he was encouraged and drank it all. After drinking the drink, Lucille noticed that his body was full of energy and that he wanted to start training immediately, and we also noticed that Broad was watching everything from afar without being seen by Lucille. Lucille's first week in the Adventurers Guild had passed, and his level of combat had increased somewhat, but he was still weak in the eyes of Broad, who continued continued to guide him and give him important advice. But what Broad liked about Lucille was his stubbornness and his determination to succeed. One day during training, Lucille was surprised by a girl crying in pain and realized that she had been bitten by a wild cat. Lucille asked her to go to the doctor after treating him so that the doctor would know if it was contagious and do what was necessary. After Lucille treated her, the girl's tears turned from sadness and pain to joy and happiness, and she hugged Lucille. We noticed that another fighter with the girl started talking to Lucille. We also noticed that this fighter was amazed that Lucille was patient with Broad's dry treatment. The fighter told Lucille that no one wants to train under Broad, but Lucille didn't care what he said. After the training session, as Lucille was walking back to his room, he felt a group of people watching him secretly. Although he didn't seem to care, after he entered his room, he kept talking to himself about who was watching him. He remembered his old life and compared it to his new one, where he trained for more than 12 hours a day, ate 3 meals a day, and all that bothered him was the strange drink that Golgar gave him with each meal. The next morning, Lucille told Broad and Golgar that someone was watching him, but Broad reassured him that the people watching him meant no harm, but were afraid that Lucille would run away because of the difficulty of the training. But Lucille told Broad that no matter what, he would complete his month-long training period. He also told him that if he caught one of the Watchers, he would punish him by drinking Golgar's miraculous drink. Lokiel's time in the Adventurers Guild was over, and although he had made great strides, he failed most of the final tests, but his enthusiasm remained, which made Broad believe that Lokiel was a completely different fighter. Broad had a meeting with Lucille and told him that he had been very committed during the month of training. Then he gave him 10 silver coins, a huge amount of money. Although Lucille was happy with the money, he told Broad that it was more than he deserved, but Broad told him he deserved more for his commitment and determination to succeed. That's when Lachelle surprises Broad and tells him that he will pay part of the money to renew his training subscription with him as a trainer so that they can continue what they started together. Lucille went to renew his membership, and there the assistant asked him if he was sure of his decision. Lucille told her that he wanted to get promoted and raise money to open a magic therapy clinic. Although the assistant told him that if he got promoted, he would have to pay extra money, he agreed. Lucille thought he would rest for a while before starting the next training, but Broad brought him straight to the training and gave him a book with important information about magical healing. Lucille was very happy with the book and promised Broad that he would do his best to balance learning to fight with learning the recipes and spells of magical healing. Afterward, Golgar brought his drink for Lucille to drink, and although the amount of the drink became larger and Lucille hated the taste, his commitment won out as usual and he drank it. Finally, at long last, Broad decides to give Lucille a day off to rest his body, but Lucille, although he really wanted the vacation, found himself at a loss as to what to do with it and felt that he had become a workaholic. Lucille then decided to head to the meat preparation place that feeds the fighters in the Adventurers Guild and other guilds. There, Lucille met with Jalid, who he recognized as Golgar's older brother. Lokiel was amazed at what he saw and heard, and we noticed that Jalid praised Lokiel's courage and determination. Jalid told him that because of his efforts, the death rate of new adventurers joining the guild was lower because Lokiel could heal their wounds quickly and professionally, and that Lokiel was able to heal them quickly. Caleb offered to slaughter a rabbit and cut up the meat, but Lucille was too scared and decided to just watch. After Caleb finished his work, Lucille decided to leave the place, and when Golgar saw him, he asked him to change his clothes, which Lucille was surprised to find were full of blood. Lucille went to the stream to wash his hands, and there Nanela came to check on him and thanked him profusely for his efforts to save the adventurers. Nanela held Lucille's hands because she noticed his nervousness after watching the slaughter of the animals and the cutting of their flesh. After a little while, Lucille thanked Nanela for her hospitality and left the place, remembering that he had gotten an extra day of rest, but as usual, he had nothing to do, as he only knew how to train or study magic healing books. Suddenly, his train of thought was interrupted by the voice of his classmates, Nanela and Melina, who suddenly appeared and told him that they were taking him to the library on Brood's orders, and although Lucille was surprised by the whole thing, he followed the instructions without question. In the library, Lucille learned that he would begin to study a large number of different books that discussed magical spells, methods of self-defense against various monsters, and effective ways to penetrate monster armor. Lucille knew that Brood had assigned him a daily period so that he could master the theoretical study as well as combat training, and Lucille complied with the order and worked hard and learned a lot of information about guilds and the history of their founding and beginnings, and also learned that guilds are the only places that prevent slavery. 6 months passed quickly for Lucille within the walls of the Adventurers Guild, and Lucille didn't feel that time had passed. We saw him walking around with Nanela, whom he liked more and more as time went on. They went shopping together, but on the way back, he was surprised by the sound of a scream and moved quickly to find the source of the sound. After a bit of running, he found Monica, who had been serving him meals at the Magic Healers Guild, lying unconscious on the ground, and Lucille noticed that she was bleeding a lot. Monica's injuries were so severe that Lucille's first attempts to deal with her wounds were ineffective, so he used a stronger spell and Monica's condition improved and she regained consciousness. Lucille told her that her wounds were so so poisoned that he thought someone had tried to kill her. Lucille was amazed at such a thing, but Monica added to that amazement by telling him that a group of mercenaries were killing adventurers for money. Lucille asked her for more details, and Monica surprised him by telling him that a group of dishonest healers were being paid to carry out assassinations and told Lucille that it was all done in slavery. Lucille told her that he had it on good authority that the guilds were completely against slavery, but Monica amended that information and told him that some legal loopholes allowed it to happen. Knowing that the attack on Monica was retaliatory, Lucille became more and more nervous, so he expected another attack and began to pay attention to all the details, asking Monica who might be a suspect in such an attack. Monica told him that the most likely suspect was a prominent healer named Butakoli, who runs the most prominent healer's clinic in Shorel, and Lucille promised her that he would take care of all the details. Lucille then asked Nanayala's permission for Monica to stay as long as possible in the Adventurers Guild, but we were filled with Nanayala's jealousy towards Monica. She told Lucille that the balance between adventurers and healers wasn't right, but in the face of Lucille's determination, Nanayala was forced to agree in the end. Not long after Monica's stay in the Adventurers Guild, we saw her, after recovering a large part of her health, thank Lucille for saving her and then asked him to specify what he wanted in return, whereupon Lucille told her that what he had done was in return for her kindness to him back in the Magical Healers Guild. Monica's attacker was arrested, but he didn't turn out to be the healer Monica thought he was. 2 months later, Lucille was surprised to find his mentor, Broad, eagerly calling him and asking him to move quickly to save a group of adventurers who were trapped and severely injured by monsters. Lucille and his mentor immediately set out and arrived at the injured, and Lucille began to heal them, but after he finished with the first one, he felt as if he had spent all his magical energy, so Broad gave him a potion of a magical drink that recharged his energy. He continued to save the others and managed to get them out of danger. Then he lost consciousness, and after he woke up, he found Nanayala sitting next to him, and although he had done everything he could to save the injured, there were some he couldn't save, so he decided that he had to do what he had to do, regardless of the outcome. A year passed and Lucille was in the Adventurers Guild, learning everything he could with diligence and dedication, and we saw him talking to his trainer Broad and thanking him for everything he had done this year for him. Lucille then told him that he was determined to leave the guild to start his own business by opening a low-priced magic healing clinic so he could save as many injured people as possible, at which point the trainer thanked him for everything and Lucille left. Lucille returns to the Magic Healers Guild, where he is greeted by Kuroro, the assistant, who is surprised to see him, and Lucille realizes that she's not in a good mood and can't decide where to start. But Kuroro started asking Lucille where he had disappeared to all that time ago, and Lucille told her he was in the Adventurers Guild. That's when Kuroro exploded at him, yelling that he was the one who caused her to suffer in the Wizards Guild by keeping Monica, her assistant, to live with him in the Adventurers Guild. She had to work twice as hard to make up for Monica's absence, and when she tried to replace Monica with another employee, no one applied for the job in the first place. Lucille then asked her how much it would cost to renew his guild membership. Kuroro surprised him by telling him that it would cost 90 silver pieces, a huge amount of money that Lucille hadn't expected. So he thought for a long time, but suddenly Master Broad appeared and gave Lucille a huge sum of money and told him that this was his earnings after a year in the Adventurers Guild. Lucille was happy to be back in the Healers Guild and began to organize his things in his room. When it was time to eat, Lucille set out to eat his meal after deciding which books he would study that day. In the food court, Lucille was surprised by the warm reception. Soon after, Monica went up to him and thanked him profusely for saving her, and we noticed that most of the guild members were surprised by Lucille and Monica's relationship. We then cut to Butakoli's bad guys informing him that the number of infected people coming to his clinics has dropped significantly in the last year, and when he asks why, they tell him that Lucille is the main culprit. Potaccioli asked them to show him where Lucille was, and his men took him there, where Lucille was practicing. Potaccioli began his conversation with Lochiel in a brusque manner, and immediately told him to stop working in his own practice and move to Potaccioli's, but Lochiel calmly refused, much to Potaccioli's chagrin. The main bone of contention between Lochiel and Butakoli was the huge amount of money Butakoli collected from his patients, while Lochiel believed it was more important to alleviate the patient's pain, regardless of the financial gain. The argument between Botticelli and Lucille became heated, so Botticelli told his men to go ahead and kill Lucille, but at that moment, Master Brood appeared, and we noticed that Botticelli and his men panicked as soon as they saw him. Brood sat down with Lucille after this situation, and Brood told Lucille that he would train him in the Magical Healers Guild in Spartan magic combat materials, which Lucille welcomed, especially since it wasn't their first interaction in terms of training. The first class was very difficult, but Lucille's response was very quick, but it was different as the martial arts subjects varied between archery, sword fighting with armor, water fighting, and more. However, Lucille was diligent in all training and obeyed the instructions of his trainer, who forbade him to check his condition through the data in his eyes without his direct permission and reminded him that the numbers are only an indicator. On the other hand, Botticelli began to devise a cunning plan to get Lucille out of the way. Botticelli Botakoli saw Luciel as the biggest obstacle to his evil ambitions, so he wrote a recommendation to transfer Luciel to a better place because of his efforts. Then he gave the recommendation to one of his men and instructed him to deliver it to the head of the Healers Guild, and he deliberately made it a recommendation to avoid suspicion in the event that Luciel was moved from the place, and he made himself hope that it would be done so that he could practice his ambitions and earn a lot of money by treating patients without Luciel's presence. Luciel continued to learn within the walls of the Healers Guild, sometimes heading to the Adventurers Guild to chat with his colleagues there. One day, as Luciel was sitting in the Adventurers Guild food court, he was surprised when Nanela came rushing in with a letter addressed to Luciel. Luciel took the letter and recognized from its cover that it was from the Church of Shorel, the guild's headquarters, so he opened the letter with great interest. Luciel was surprised by the contents of the letter, which recommended that he be transferred from the guilds to the church headquarters due to his excellence, diligence, and excellence in practicing various magical healing methods, with the transfer to take place 6 months from the date the letter was sent. When Luciel read the letter, he had mixed feelings and didn't know whether this was an accomplishment or an attempt to push him away. But Brod, who was by his side at the time, immediately understood that this letter was a malicious attempt by Potaccioli to get him out of the way. So he told Lucille this fact and also told him that they would have to work hard during those months to put an end to all of Potaccioli's evil plans. We then saw a discussion between Golgar and Brood about Luciel's level of combat. Despite Luciel's diligence and dedication to his training, he was still at the first level of combat. However, Brod noted that he himself had risen to level 7 during his time training Luciel. Galib joined Golgar and Brood and began discussing Botakoli's attempts to keep Luciel away from the Adventurers Guild and the Healers Guild, noting Golgar's jealousy as most of the guild girls are attracted to Luciel. Luciel asked Brood to meet him at the training ground, where Luciel bowed to his master and then asked him to follow him nearby, much to Brood's confusion. Luciel and Brood went with him to the cemetery, and there we saw Luciel speaking with great emotion in front of the gravestones of the adventurers he could not save. Then Luciel turned to his instructor and recommended that he should keep training the fighters himself even after he left the place, and Brood was surprised by this request. However, Luciel immediately removed his surprise and told his mentor that Potaccioli was trying to get him out of the place so that he could do all his bad business of extorting money from the fighters, but if Brod trained a few loyal fighters, it would be different. Although the request seemed strange to Brod at first, he felt for the first time that Luciel's adventurer's spirit had already surpassed that of a healer. Brod asked him if their time together had changed Luciel for the better. Luciel tells him that despite the mistakes he still makes as a fighter, he feels much improved, at least mentally, and Brood promises to do his best to counter Botticelli's evil plans. Brod then turned to Luciel about Monica and started asking if they had a mutual crush, but Luciel was too embarrassed to change the subject. Before they parted ways, they discovered that Monica and Nanela were eavesdropping nearby to overhear their conversation, but Luciel asked them to come out and started talking to them. Luciel addressed Nanela and told her that she was a good friend who had helped him with many things over the past 2 years, from washing his sweaty clothes after training to making his workouts easier. Luciel then turned his attention to Monica and told her that she was a dear friend who had helped him in many things, but Monica told him that she owed him a lot and could say that she owed him her whole life. Without him, Monica would not be alive today, but when Luciel heard this, he told her that he had done what he had to do and nothing more. After a flurry of mutual flattery, Luciel told them that he was about to leave the guilds for a new place and promised to keep them in his heart at all times until he came back and met them again. Although they were very touched, they wished Luciel well and said goodbye. Then Luciel went to say goodbye to Master Brod, who, we noticed, despite his strong personality, was very touched by Luciel's farewell. We saw Luciel thank him, but the teacher told him that he was a good student who did everything that was required of him with great diligence, and then the teacher gave him a magic bag as a gift of gratitude, and we noticed that it was actually a bag of money, which made Luciel so happy and moved that he could not hold back his tears, while Brod was also moved and left the place. Luciel tried to control his emotions and remembered that he must be stronger, especially since his next period will be lonely and he must control his emotions. Then he left the place and went out of the gate after he reached a very advanced level in combat and healing ability. As soon as he saw his new teammates, he got emotional and remembered his old teammates and started crying again, but his new teammates calmed him down. Luciel began his journey to the headquarters of the Church of Shorel to start his new job. On the way, he missed all the details of the old places he was in, and we saw him remember what happened in the Adventurers Guild and the Magic Healers Guild, as well as what happened in the Magic Healers Guild. In the end, he decided to gather his strength to focus on the next stage. After some time, Luciel and his colleagues arrived at the administrative headquarters of the Church of Shorel, where receptionist Milty was waiting for them. Luciel's colleague Bazin asked Milty to call the manager of the place so that they could find out the necessary arrangements, and we learned that Bazin was responsible for introducing Luciel to the manager. Milty asked them to wait a little while for the manager to come to them. After a short time, the manager arrived. Bazin introduced Luciel to the director, who was very surprised to learn that Luciel was originally from from the Adventurer's School, and before that from the Magical Healer's School, and even more surprised to learn that Lucille was one of Brood's most prominent disciples. The headmaster then asked Lucille if he was indeed treating the injured for 1 silver coin, and Lucille assured him that he was. When the headmaster asked Lucille if there was anything he needed, Lucille told him he needed 3 barrels of that drink that Gulgur used to give him in the Adventurers Guild, because that drink contains matter X, which carries a lot of energy. But the biggest problem with the drink was that it smelled so bad that people in the hall had to plug their noses because they couldn't stand the smell. Nevertheless, the manager brought Lucille the amount of the drink he had ordered and handed it to him, and Lucille put the drink in his magic bag that Brod had given him. After being greeted at the church's administrative building, he had to go to the church building itself. Bazan and the other colleagues drove him there, and we saw Lucille marveling at the magnitude and splendor of the church building. He then entered the building and spoke to the receptionist and told her his name and that he was here on the Pope's order, and asked her to speak to someone in the church. The receptionist took out a glass ball and began to manipulate it. Lucille realized that this ball was a telepathic ball. The receptionist was amazed at Lucille's wealth of knowledge, but she was even more amazed when she learned that Lucille was a psychic. But she was even more amazed to learn that he was a member of both the Adventurers Guild and the Magical Healers Guild. After some time, one of the priests in charge of the church arrived on the scene, and we learned that his name was Granhart. Granhart asked Lucille for his name, and after confirming that he was the right person, took him on a tour of the building. Lucille was so fascinated by what he saw that he took a magical elevator with Granhart, who told him that it was the only way to enter the church so that no one else could enter the building. Lucille was frozen in place when he saw Lumina, who had greeted him on the first day of his trip to the Guild of Magical Healers. Lucille was very happy to see her again, and so was Lumina, who kept talking to Lucille. But she sensed that Granhart wanted to continue his tour with Lucille, so she apologized and left Lucille to meet later. Lucille continued his tour with Granhart and entered a room that looked strange to Lucille, like an old torture chamber, but Granhart assured him that it was just a storage room and he shouldn't worry. Granhart and Lokiel arrived at the hall they wanted, and Granhart began to talk to Lokiel about several things about his magical healing ability. Granhart told him that he was accused of using new magical healing methods and that he was being paid far less than his colleagues. Lokiel told him about all the irregularities he had seen in the Healers Guild and that he was trying to treat everyone for as little money as possible, and asked him to publicize this method, and Granhart promised to take it up with his superiors. After some discussion, Granhart told Lucille that his new profession in the church would be an exorcist and that he would belong to the spiritual cleansing department, and told him that the salary would be 20 gold coins, a figure that surprised Lucille greatly because it was a huge fortune. Granhart then told Lucille to go to bed early because they would start the hard training the next day. After Lucille went to his room, he kept thinking about everything that had happened. The next morning, Lucille went to Lumina's room to chat with her. Lumina asked him why he had come to the church, and Lucille told her that he had been summoned. When Lumina asked him what he would be doing at the church, he told her that he would be working in the spiritual cleansing department. When Lucille asks why, she tells him that there is an ancient labyrinth underneath the church where many zombie mutants are found. Lumina tells him that if he finds any treasure in the labyrinth, he's entitled to take it. After their conversation was over, Lucille thanked Lumina for this valuable information. Afterward, Lucille then went to the training center where he met Granhart and his colleague Gord, who would be Lucille's companion during his stay at the church. Granhart then gave him his credentials and asked him to recite an oath. After Lucille did so, Granhart told him that he had to keep this oath or he would be severely punished. Granhart left Lucille with Gord and left. Gord then informed Lucille of all the steps they were going to take. They entered the maze and Gord began to teach Lucille the zombie elimination spell. He quickly learned and began to improve his zombie killing technique by reading the spell on his magic sword that Brood had given him, and it worked and was much more effective at killing zombies. When it was time to eat, Lucille began to eat his meal and drink the Gulgur drink, which smelled normal compared to the nasty smell of the labyrinth. After Lucille finished eating, he was surprised by a group of skeletons chasing him, but he managed to fend them off with the spell despite his panic, and was satisfied with this much cleansing on his first day. Gord started looking for Lucille because he didn't return to his room that day, and after a long search, Gord managed to find him. As soon as Gord approached him, Lucille was so frightened that he cast the purge spell on him. If it weren't for Gord's immense magical ability, he would have died instantly due to the effect of the spell. Gord told Lucille to calm down and then took him on a tour of the church's corridors, and then they went to check out the store for magical items and exclusive books sold only in the church. There, Lucille met Kathlia, who was in charge of selling magical items that Lucille knew he could buy by exchanging his magic points for them. Kathlia then asked Lucille to hand her his card so she could see how many points he had. After Kathlia examined the card, she realized that Lucille had collected over 4,000 points on the first day, which was a great harvest. Kathlia tells him that he can redeem the points for anything he wants, whether it's a book or one of his magical silver weapons, the touch of which is enough to kill a zombie instantly. We saw Lucille trying to buy a rare book, but Kathlia told him that it cost over 1,000,000 points. Lucille walked out of the library, hoping that his level would would rise so that he could buy this expensive book. As he was walking, he was surprised by Grandheart in front of him, and Grandheart started to ask him how he was doing at school, at which time Luciel thanked him for his interest in Grandheart, then started to recommend some important information to Luciel. He told him to sleep well and eat all his meals, and told him that sleep is very important because his job in the church is very dangerous, and if he loses his concentration one day, he may be in serious danger of death. Grandheart then handed Luciel his cloak and told him that this cloak was his official uniform inside the church, and that it was called the seminary cloak and was of high value and was worn only by advanced fighters. Luciel thanked him and took the cloak and went to his room, where he put on the cloak and picked up his weapons and was very proud of himself. The next day, Luciel went to continue clearing the building, and we learned that he was on the 5th floor after he had cleared all the previous floors and things were going well, and Luciel was no longer afraid of zombie attacks. As soon as they appeared, even in large numbers, he was able to deal with them successfully. Suddenly, he found himself in front of a strange-looking room with a mysterious door, and he decided not to enter the room until he got Gord's opinion. Luciel met with Gord and asked him to enter the room, but Gord was very jealous of Luciel because this room is only accessible to advanced level, and it is strange that Luciel was able to reach it after only a few days of training. After gathering all his weapons and putting on his clerical cloak, Luciel gathered his courage and decided to enter the room. He entered the room, which was mysterious and frightening. Suddenly, Luciel saw a strange colored light coming from afar, but after a while he discovered that it was not just a light but torch lit by many zombies who suddenly filled the room, which frightened Luciel. But Luciel tried to calm himself down and started using his magic spell, but it didn't work and didn't move anything inside the room, so the zombies started attacking him and Luciel couldn't do anything but run away. But one of the zombies managed to reach him and wound him in his stomach, which made Luciel summon all his courage and attack the creatures with his weapons, and in a short time he managed to eliminate them and made him think about the valuable prize that he will get after leaving the room. Suddenly, a huge mythical monster appeared, which Luciel recognized as a white creature. The problem was that these types of monsters are not affected by any spells, and Luciel would have to use his imagination to defeat it. Luciel used his imagination and managed to deceive the monster by sticking his magic spear into its body, causing it to disappear. Luciel then cast a healing spell on himself and his wound disappeared. A ladder then appeared, and Luciel decided to descend his steps to go to Catlia and show her what he was able to take, where Luciel was able to take White's cloak and his wand. When Catlia saw these things, she was very surprised and chastised Luciel for going to a floor far above her level. But Luciel told her that this was his job as an exorcist and told her that he wanted to know how many points he had earned that day. However, Catlia, after showing him his card, told him that his score was only 108,000 points, a number that was much lower than Luciel's expectations. He then decided to go with Catlia to the high priest of the church to show him the tools he was able to take after defeating White. The high priest was amazed by the tools and told Catlia that Luciel was one of the best exorcists to join the church and that his stats were very high. The high priest decided to trade Luciel the magical tools he had obtained. The priest asked Luciel what he wanted in exchange for these tools, and Luciel asked for a larger magic bag than the one he had. But the priest told him that he would give him something more valuable, a magical bag with supernatural features, so Luciel thanked him and left with Catlia. Luciel thought long and hard about the mistakes he had made during his battle against the monster, and wondered what would happen if Brood found out about his mistakes. He kept telling himself that if that were to happen, then Brood would surely ask to return to the Adventurers Guild to correct his mistakes. A moment later, Lumina entered with 2 new members of the Fuji Foundation. Lumina introduces the 2 members to Luciel, and we learn that their names are Quina and Luchi. Luciel then introduces himself to them, and they all decide to have breakfast together. While eating, Lumina kept berating Luciel for rushing to chase powerful monsters on high floors far above his current level, and Luciel promised not to do it again. After finishing his breakfast, Luciel went with Catlia to pick up the magical sack given to him by the high priest. Luciel noticed that the magic bag was different from anything he had ever seen before. He also noticed that the magic bag changed color depending on what it was used for. It was then that Catlia informed him that this magic bag is one of the best magical tools an exorcist can use because it is easy to use and can hide anything in less than a second. After that, Luciel continued his exorcism mission on the different floors and learned a few days later that he would be training with the Valkyrie Knights, who were so strong and skilled that when they started running, Luciel was 8 full laps behind them. Then he started practicing swordsmanship against a Valkyrie Knight, but she easily defeated him, and that's when Luciel began to remember Brood's instructions. He remembered that he had told him that most of the people who would fight him were stronger than he was, but that he had to use the strength that no one else knew about, his determination. Luciel got up to fight again and did a little better, but the knight who was dueling him managed to knock him unconscious. After he regained consciousness, he found Quina and Luchi around him, and they told him that Lumina had asked them to take care of him. Afterward, Luciel realized that Lumina was a high-ranking Valkyrie, so she gathered everyone together and discussed everything that had happened. She told everyone that that despite his lack of combat prowess, Luciel is one of the most prominent magical healers in the church, and mentioned that he managed to reach level 5 in record time, which made most of the knights and knights jealous. Afterward, Luciel kept talking to himself and remembering Master Broad's instructions, who told him repeatedly that numbers don't always matter. So he decided to ignore all the positive and negative things Lumen had said about him and went to the 16th floor to complete the zombie cleanup of the entire building. It was easy at first, and Luciel was able to take out most of the zombies, but suddenly he stepped into a trap he hadn't realized he was walking into. A large group of zombies came out, but Luciel was able to defeat them with spells, and when there were too many, he was able to use his sword and shield to defeat them all. Luciel continued to climb the floors until he reached the 20th floor, but he decided to wait before deciding to break into the room at the end of the 20th floor because he believed that this room contained a frightening monster within its walls. The next day, training began, led by Elizabeth, who was the most skilled Valkyrie knight in the use of the sword. Luciel was amazed at the Valkyrie's frighteningly fast swordsmanship, and even more amazed when he learned that the swords used in the training were all real swords. When it was Luciel's turn to fight, he fearlessly stepped forward to fight Elizabeth, who was faster and more skilled than him and managed to defeat him easily. But despite his defeat, Luciel was interested in learning his weaknesses that led to his loss, so he listened carefully to Elizabeth. After realizing his weaknesses, he decided to go to the 20th floor, confident this time because his form was better. But as soon as he entered the room, he realized that there was a dam in the room, so he turned back and told Catalia what happened in the room. Catalia then began to tell Luciel what happened in the past on this floor, where the white monster broke the church's rules and went to live on this floor. The church's fighters built a dam so that the monsters couldn't leave the church and go to the labyrinth, so that the fighters could easily eliminate them. But due to Luciel's diligence and advanced level, Catalia took him to the most senior priestess in the church, who was very highly regarded. The priestess thanked Luciel for his diligence and promised to give him a reward in the form of a weapon and magical armor that would enable him to defend himself against any monster, and Luciel was very happy. Luciel goes to the training center to order 10 more barrels of Matter X. The officials conclude that he wants to increase his power significantly. We also noticed that the fighters were looking at him with amazement and jealousy because Luciel had risen so quickly in the church that he was wearing the seminary robes that many veterans don't wear because they haven't reached the same level yet. The trainer agreed to this amount of drink, but Luciel noticed that he was very concerned, and then he asked Catalia why, and Catalia told him that the trainer is sad because many adventurers and fighters have been injured recently because a large number of dangerous monsters appeared and managed to get them. Luciel wondered why they don't go to a clinic to receive proper treatment, but Catalia replied that they don't have the gold coins to do so, and Luciel assured her that his price for treatment is fixed at 1 silver coin, which puzzled everyone present due to the small amount of money. The scene then shifted to see a number of injured fighters who did not manage to survive their injuries, and most of them died. But after a short time, Luciel went to the place of the injured. He began to offer his services, but we noticed that the injured were not welcoming his presence because they hate healers, but when Luciel offered his services to them in exchange for 1 silver coin, they welcomed it, and indeed Luciel began to treat them and managed to do so with great success that made them all amazed. After it was done, he advised them not to get into trouble or injured, as he would not be able to help them every time. Luciel then returned to the church, where he was greeted by Catalia, who told him that his fame had spread far and wide, and that he had been dubbed an eccentric saint. After that, Luciel went to the Valkyrie Knights to check on them, where some of them asked him to heal them, which Luciel was able to do successfully. Luciel continued to train and was able to eliminate all the monsters he encountered on the various floors. After 6 months, Luciel reached the 30th floor and managed to defeat the huge monster on that floor. Catalia interviewed Luciel and was impressed with his level despite his young age, and told him that he had over 400,000 points, a very impressive number. Luciel was impressed and told her that he could buy a new clerical cloak. Catalia agreed and told him that he could save the rest of his points to buy a magical drink that would help him win his upcoming battles. But before the conversation ended, Catalia was surprised that Luciel had been drinking X for over 2.5 years, which was against the rules for healers and fighters in the church, so she decided to take Luciel to make that report to the High Priestess. The High Priestess was impressed with the level of progress Luciel had achieved in a very short period of time, but Catalia pointed out to her that Luciel had been drinking drink X for a long time, which meant it was doubtful that these achievements were on his own. The High Priestess asked him about the ingredients and the real name of the substance, but Luciel told her that it was called Substance X, and that he didn't know what else it was. Luciel then managed to conjure up one of the barrels of the substance, but Catalia couldn't stand the smell and told him to get rid of it immediately. We noticed that the High Priestess didn't pay much attention to X. She told Luciel that the main ingredients were dragon's heart, spiritual water, and other ingredients, and that its use was common among adventurers, not healers. Luciel then assured her that he had been drinking this drink 3 times a day for more than 2.5 years just to feel strong and energized. After they finished talking about Matter X, the High Priestess asked Luciel to bring her the tools that he managed to take from all the monsters monsters he defeated and asked him how many of them he had. And then Lucille told her that in the different floors he managed to defeat 5 monsters of a fierce and dangerous type. The High Priestess asked him to hand over all the tools he had taken from the monsters to Katlia on the condition that Lucille would continue to explore the labyrinth and defeat the monsters inside. Lucille and Katlia returned to the residence again, and the next day, Lucille prepared to start a new day of adventures and victory over monsters, at which time Katlia wished him luck and gave him a letter that she told him that it came from the High Priestess. Lucille received the letter and headed to the labyrinth to start training, but he decided to read this letter before starting, and the letter was a detailed report regarding Substance X. From this letter, Lucille learned that this substance was originally intended to control human appetites such as hunger and sleep, and was given to the fighters so that they could concentrate solely on training. However, this substance was not popular due to its unpleasant odor, so over time it was eliminated and replaced with less potent substances. After Lucille finished reading the report, he put the letter aside and decided to start training, especially when he heard the footsteps of zombies nearby. A month passed after Lucille learned the truth about Substance X. After that, he continued his training with perfection and determination and reached the 40th floor and managed to defeat the monster there, and also managed in the previous floors to defeat monsters of extreme ferocity that he had never encountered before. Lucille then decided to go to the Adventurers Guild in order to gather more information about the zombie monsters that had begun to appear at a time when Lucille felt that his knowledge of them was almost non-existent. Upon arriving at the gate of the Adventurers Guild, Lucille was surprised by a young girl, but he didn't understand what she wanted, so Lucille offered the girl to enter the guild with him. Once inside, he was greeted with a hero's welcome and demanded that everyone in the guild bring in all the injured so that he could treat them. Suddenly, Lucille found a large number of injured people in front of him, so he started treating them immediately and had to drink a lot of magical liquid to conserve his energy. After Lucille finished treating them, the little girl asked him to go to the slums together. Lucille asked if it could be postponed, but the officials within the Adventurers Guild told him it was necessary. Lucille agreed and took the little girl to the slums, where he was surprised by the large amounts of blood and victims littering the streets of the village. But as Lucille approached the victims, one of them, who wasn't dead, got up and stabbed Lucille, but Lucille refused to die and used his healing spell to cure everyone in the neighborhood. Then he realized that the man who stabbed him was the father of the little girl who was with him, and that he did it because he was afraid for his daughter. He treated all the injured people in this village and the following villages, taking only a nominal fee, and then began to advise them to pay attention to personal hygiene and clean wounds in case of injury. And after that situation, Lucille became famous in all the neighboring villages. Lucille then went to the capital, where he met Nanela and Monica, who told him that they were about to get married. This, of course, came as a great shock to Lucille, who had hoped that at least one of them liked him. But Nanela and Monica were amazed that Lucille didn't know about it and told him that they had sent him many letters. But Lucille told her that he hadn't received any. Lucille then realized that the church officials had forgotten to give him those letters, but suddenly, while they were talking, Lucille learned that some monsters had attacked a neighboring village, injuring many of the inhabitants. Nanela and Monica asked Lucille to go with him on this trip, and Lucille agreed. They arrived in the village and Lucille was able to treat all the injured people, and then the church officials decided to hold a big feast as an appreciation and apology to Lucille for those letters that didn't reach him. After the feast, Monica told him that she had to go back with Nanela. Lucille promised them that the next visit would be from him, and Nanela and Monica welcomed it. When Lucille went to them, he found them bowing in respect and appreciation for his efforts in treating them, and Lucille asked them to stand up because there was no need to bow, as he had only done his duty. Lucille then spotted the little girl he met at the Adventurers Guild gate and learned from her father that her name was Sheila and that she had a rare vocal cord disease that rendered her unable to speak. Lucille tried a new spell to cure her, and after he completed the spell, he told her father that she could regain even a fraction of her vocal power soon. Lucille has been in the church for a year, exploring the labyrinth and defeating monsters, but he recently discovered that there is a monster on the 40th floor that he never knew existed before. But he also realized that this monster is extremely powerful, stronger than any monster he has ever fought before, and he must prepare for this battle. So the fighter Elizabeth told him that she would help him prepare for this battle, and a duel began between them. And although Elizabeth defeated Lucille, she was surprised by the strength that Lucille had become, and was surprised by the rapid development of his level. The next day, Lucille went straight to the 40th floor and learned that the monster on this floor was once two different monsters, but they had merged to form one of the most dangerous monsters in the maze. After a short time, the monster did appear. Lucille began to recite spells, but they didn't work, and when Lucille used his magic weapons, the monster was unharmed. Coincidentally, Lucille discovered that the monster hated the smell of Matter X and would stay away from it. So Lucille used the barrels of Matter X as a shield and put it in front of him so the monster couldn't attack him. Remembering all of Brood's advice and Elizabeth's directions, Lucille began to plan a powerful attack on the monster and was able to attack and defeat the monster. Lucille then headed up to the 50th floor with a barrel of Matter X in his clothes, which was a good monster repellent. Lucille didn't show up for a long time because he was still in the maze fighting monsters, but when he got to the 50th floor, he couldn't open the gate. When he tried to change his route, he got lost and had used up almost all of his food and drink, so he started reading some of the magic books he had with him to see if he could find a way out of his predicament. The world outside had changed dramatically after Lucille's disappearance, and the price of magical healing clinics had skyrocketed. After reading for a long time, Lucille finally managed to find a recipe that was called the Circle of Refuge in the book, and he knew that this circle could provide complete protection for himself, even if he couldn't defeat the monster he was fighting. After a short time, Lucille managed to reach the gate of the 50th floor monster, and once he entered the monster's room, he was surprised by it, and it was indeed frightening and extremely large. And although Lucille tried to use the most powerful spells he had, but all his attempts were unsuccessful. The monster then began to attack Lucille, but he was able to use the sanctuary circle, which kept the monster as far away from him as possible. Lucille then took a gulp from the last bottle of magic potion he had with him and tried to keep some of the magic potion with him, and then started reading spells. Lucille combined an attack spell, a healing spell, and a circle of refuge spell and fired it at the monster, and this time he managed to defeat it. After the battle was over, Lucille was surprised to find a book of forbidden magic, which he carried in his magic bag and resolved to report it to the High Priestess. Suddenly, a strangely shaped portal opened. As Lucille approached it, he felt that the portal was draining his magical energy, but he dared to summon the strength to go through it and was surprised to find a huge dragon lying there. At first, Lucille thought it was dead, but as he got closer, he realized it was a dragon trap, and the dragon began to attack Lucille. But after the dragon was reassured that Lucille was not an evil spirit, he offered to take the treasure that was in the labyrinth. But Lucille was not greedy for such a treasure, despite its enormous size and many jewels, which impressed the dragon so much that he decided to give Lucille his protection, which made Lucille one of the most powerful beings in that world and made it almost impossible to kill him. After the dragon gave his protection to Lucille, he disappeared, and after a short time, magical powers came and brought Lucille back to his headquarters in the church, where all his colleagues were surprised by his return, as they thought he had died in the maze. Master Broad arrived on the scene and was very proud of his good student Lucille. When Lucille joked with him and told him that he now had a superpower that no one would be able to defeat him for having it, the master decided to punish him for his arrogance and started a fight with him. But as usual, Master Brood managed to defeat Lucille with ease. After the fight, Broad spoke to Lucille, giving him advice and reminding him that a true champion must always remain humble, no matter how many fans he has, and then he said his goodbyes and left. Lucille then remembered that he had to deliver a full report to the High Priestess. He went to her office and told her that he had found the Tome of Forbidden Magic. After that, Lucille asked the High Priestess to let everyone in the hall out, and told her that on the 50th floor he found a sacred dragon, and we noticed that the High Priestess was amazed by this news. The High Priestess thanked Lucille for his efforts in unraveling the mystery of the labyrinth that had remained unknown for more than 50 years, and the High Priestess then decided to give Lucille a promotion as a reward for his efforts. The High Priestess asked Lucille to give a speech, which made him feel very nervous, but he gathered his courage and started giving the speech and told everyone that he would use this promotion and create a manual of fees for healers so that no one would dare to take advantage of any of the injured. At the end of the event, we saw Sheila, the little girl who was unable to speak, talking to her father, who was overjoyed at his daughter's recovery.